But let's talk about some of the big stories. Your take on the Ulez situation. I say Ulez and this clear secret plan that Labour have to impose pay-per-mile charges on us that will make Ulez look like loose change. I say this is Labour's poll tax. They could lose the election on this.
Yeah, you've just taken the words out of my mouth. I was going to say the same thing. I think Labour have got the election in the palm of their hands if they want it, but they're seeking almost any way possible to destroy their own chances. This is one of these examples. This is not what the public want. It's draconian. It's, as you mentioned earlier, it's cruel, and it's badly thought out. It's not just a disruption. It's not just the cost, but it's also aspects of data as well. You know, you've got this thing with Ulez and, you know, the stuff that's going on with the cameras and also the restriction in terms of movement. Then you combine it with what Labour is suggesting, it is another form of a poll tax. It's absolutely an appalling idea, but also we are already getting charged per mile every time we fill up the car, and then the taxes that go with that. This is basically compounding the problem. I think this debate is something that's sort of in some ways caught the imagination in terms of anger, because we're in a difficult time right now. People need their cars. That's just a fact and reality of life. To get their kids to school, to go to work, sometimes in emergencies as well. And when they're getting penalised and punished almost for basically driving for essential reasons, no one's going to vote for that. And I think it's almost bizarre what Labour are doing. It's also about control. Yeah. You know, our political parties right now like to give off the impression that they know best, but all they're doing is punishing the people that they are elected to serve, namely us. And I think Labour could well pay a heavy price for this if they continue with this floating of this idea.
Yeah, and of course, Ulez being expanded to the outer London boroughs, which happens tomorrow, will not improve air quality one bit. So it's all about raising revenue. So with Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, and as I keep stressing, you know, this isn't just a London story. This is happening in cities all over Britain. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. Then you get pay-per-mile, which will be even worse. But Sadiq Khan, you know, he said it's all about air quality. You know, if he said, look, you know, I've made a real mess of London's finances. We're on the brink of bankruptcy, and frankly, I need the money. So I'm going to have to impose Ulez. You know, I go, well, that's terrible. But at least, you know, I say, OK, fair enough, you need the money. But instead, he's lying to us, saying it's all about air quality. That's what I find particularly objectionable. This is a policy based on a Sadiq Khan barefaced lie.
Yeah, well, this happened with COVID as well. It's called cooking the books to get agendas through, where they end up sort of framing a particular type of numbers and modelling and methodology to fit their own agendas. But it doesn't make it right. It's disingenuous at the very best. There's a number of COVID measures that were like that as well. It wasn't following the science. It's following political motives. But on this one, I find it odd, because whether it's Tories or Labour, on this aspect, whether it's Ulez or whether it's LTNs or 15-minute cities, whatever it might be, yeah, you're right, they're getting rolled out in different shapes and forms around the country. But it's having a massive impact in terms of disruption and also economic cost. And a lot of businesses, for instance, the test runs in Oxford, saying their turnovers were down. And it's actually paradoxically causing other problems, because cars are going to different areas to travel, so therefore causing congestion, potentially pollution in other areas. It's crass logic, it is cruel, it is another form of a poll tax, and no one's going to vote for that. And I know there's been consultation exercises about this, but sometimes there hasn't been. Public and businesses do not feel that they've been consulted on something. They certainly didn't vote for it. And the parties that are wanting to implement this at the next election will pay a heavy price. But sadly, at the moment, we seem to have our two main political parties floating around the same idea on this. And this is the problem. We don't have a political party, a chance of winning the next election, who are doing things in the best interest of people with sensible policies and giving people a break. We've just had 3 years of all kinds of restrictions from COVID onwards, and now we've got some more under the auspice of the most crass logic agenda of them all, net zero.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the migrant crisis. We just found out that 4,000 more migrants came over the last week. the last month. They can't go onto the Bibi Stockholm migrant barge, obviously, because that's a sort of floating, rusting, empty hulk full of Legionnaire's disease. So they continue to go into hotels, costing us a fortune. And they're nowhere near solving this crisis, are they? They're nowhere near stopping the boats. This is going to be the ship that sinks Rishi Sunak if he's not careful.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain issues are going to be the main priority at the next election. We've just touched on Ulez being one of them, but I think immigration is another. I've said this many, many times before. We welcome the benefits of economic immigration. It has a lot of benefits. It can boost a lot of businesses, but there's a difference between that and the sort of uncontrolled element. And I think what the government are doing is they're peddling all these different ideas that don't join up and are probably unworkable. It's causing a lot of resentment in various communities. Again, the communities and individuals haven't been asked about this. It's just been implemented, and no one voted for this. What the government should be doing, but they won't because it's difficult and it costs too much, is actually having a proper process in place at the border, where there's a proper verification process and registration process, but they don't do that. So that what happens is the problem gets out of control. Communities start getting upset about this, and actually individuals in this community, when they show their objection, are unfairly called xenophobes. They're not. They're concerned about their communities. I mean, they're concerned about the lack of action and effective policy from government. And so Sunak, when he came in with sort of self-entitlement as Prime Minister, he promised and pledged a number of different things, but he hasn't achieved any of them. One of them being immigration. It's all management speak. They float out these new ideas, the latest one being tagging. Yeah. Really?
It's just a proposal. I'll believe it when I see it. Also, the logic of it is supposed to be we're running out of places to put them, so we can't have them fleeing. We can't have them running away. Now, I agree with that. We don't want them running away, although many of them do. Putting an electronic tag on them will stop them running away, and therefore we'll have even less places to put the new arrivals. So I should say fewer places there. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it's just ridiculous. And also from a human rights point of view, it's terrible as well. Yeah. And the problem is twofold. Actually the welfare of individuals who are coming into the country by sort of safe passage, but there has to then be from that a safe and secure registration and verification process. That's the bit that's missing. And then on the final aspect of this, it's about communities having their say. And whether we've got the right infrastructures, the right support mechanism for business. At the moment, you've got a topic that no one is getting to root and branch about how do we solve this problem from the very start to the finish and integration with communities. The government aren't doing it. It's not just under Sunak's watch. I mean, this has been going on, if people are honest about this, for decades, albeit the problem is a lot worse now because successive governments haven't got on top of this issue. And anyone who says that, then they're smeared as some sort of xenophobe. It's absolutely ridiculous. We don't have proper debate in this country where we go through the issue to come up with the right solutions in the long term. What happens is people pick a side, it becomes simplistic, people get smeared, and meanwhile the government are too scared to actually make effective, hard-headed decisions that won't just be on their watch, that might last as effective legacy policies into the future.
It's fascinating that both parties, Labour and the Tories, they seem to have these sort of concrete boot policies round their ankles that could sink either, that could ruin either. Yeah. You've got Ulez and paper mile with the Labour Party. You've got the migrant crisis with the Tories. You're right. It's like both of them just don't want to win the next election. Let's come up with some policies that people hate. It's unbelievable. James, we'll talk again soon. Thank you so much for your time. James Melville, political and social commentator.